Hey, this is Corey Stoker from SkySwitch. This video is something a little different than what I've done in the past. This is basically going to be a long-form podcast review of an application that many of you know called Glance. We do talk about other stuff as we go along. It's not only about Glance, but you can check out the website at www.voipglance.com. And Glance is run by Guy Fawkes. So I'm joined by a couple people, which will be introduced in the podcast, one of them being Guy. And I can't say enough good things about Guy. He's a reseller / partner of ours, and I always enjoy our talks. Since Glance is built using RPBX API, it's a good representation of what you can do yourself if you put your time and energy into it. I will disclose that I consider Guy to be a friend of mine, although this is not a paid advertisement, and there was no exchange of money, favors, goods, or anything like that, and SkySwitch doesn't sell Glance directly. We are simply reviewing the application, but there is a benefit from my side, and that is showing you a great example of what can be done with our API, again with time and energy. So, without further ado, welcome to the first podcast. All right, Glance is up on the screen. Let's start with some introductions. I have with me Guy Fawkes from Telepathic Communications of Florida. And Guy, you've been with SkySwitch for longer than me, which is really interesting.
Are you sure?
Yes, because on my first few days, Eric wanted me to talk to you so you could kind of evaluate me and give him some feedback. And I think I got good feedback. That's why I'm still here. So that
really is funny. Now I think you're evaluating me. Not just today, but every day.
No, not at all. We also have Derek Hennekens, who is brand new to SkySwitch and is currently learning our internal ropes. But Derek is really familiar with NetSapiens and SkySwitch already, and I'm happy to make his first introduction as our new product director. Welcome aboard, Derek.
Yeah, welcome, Derek.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here. It's exciting.
So we're going to get a chance to just go over Glance kind of from Guy's point of view. I've seen it throughout the years on and off. I hear nothing but great feedback from resellers, and it's something that I typically end up recommending when resellers are looking for some of this capability but don't want to build it out themselves. We'll talk about some of the API type stuff in here as well. But Guy, take it away.
Okay, awesome. Well, I hate to have people just staring at a blank screen here, but I'll take just a minute and talk about Glance before I log in, just to give a real brief or background of it. It started probably 5 years ago. I closed it started accidentally, actually, but I closed a deal for a company, and we closed it on the understanding that we could do something for them, once we put our phones in their office, and it turned out we couldn't. And I didn't realize that till I already took the check and went back, and I was all excited about, I was pretty early on to SkySwitch, so I was pretty excited about, putting someone on the platform. So I called Derek Hennekens, the original, if I can call him the creator of SkySwitch, but
yeah, totally. At
the time, Eric, even today, knows everything, it seems like, but I told him what happened, and he said very nonchalantly, well, no big deal, use the API. Yep. And I didn't really know what that meant. I mean, other than maybe I'd heard the phrase a little bit, but I'm not a programmer. So I had a young guy working for me, and he had a little bit of programming skill. So we talked about it, and he said, well, maybe I can figure out a way to do that. And that was really the first revision of Glance, even before it was called Glance. And all it did was it allowed a guy, like a call manager in a small outbound sales company, to change the caller ID on the fly for the city that they were calling into that day. So he had a small group of maybe 3 or 4 sales guys, and if they're going to call into Chattanooga, they needed a Chattanooga number, and they wanted to look like they were calling from that area for, better call answer rate. And so we built a way for him to do that using the API.
There's a few things I want to kind of talk about there and kind of unravel. One is the API, just because it's something that a lot of people are kind of afraid of. It's an acronym that scares a lot of people, mm-hmm. and it's really not that difficult. What are your thoughts about, I don't know if you want me to say the guy's name, your text name, but how easily did he get into it? Or Did he struggle or?
No, actually, he said, well, let me do a proof of concept. And he had the original proof of concept done for the very first predecessor to Glance done in probably about a day, maybe even a few hours. Because I remember he came back and he said, okay, I think I got something. I'm like, you're kidding. And he had figured it out pretty darn quickly just by reading the documents.
Yeah,
and of course he had some skills that reading the documents wouldn't necessarily help me, but it helped him because he was already, had a kind of a bent towards that type of thing.
Yeah, and I picked those skills up after starting with SkySwitch myself and just working with APIs because I've been a technician my whole life and not a programmer. But the API is so beneficial from every point of view, even if you're not a programmer. Just going in and rebooting the phone from command line is amazing.
Well, he got us up and running on that very first little thing, and I was able to deliver the product using the API, and we had built just a small web page for them to log into, and they could pick the extensions, and of course they owned the DIDs, so it was easy for them to say, okay, whatever city it is, they just picked that city and saved it, and then those guys could still could dial out like that. But once I realized that we could do that, we jumped into I said, can you make me a web page where I can see things? And I think the first thing we did was learn how to reboot telephones.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
Of course, you could still reboot phones through NetSapiens, but it was just a rather tedious process.
Right. It was, at that time, it was surely one at a time, no way to do it in bulk.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that was the thing that we went, oh, that's really cool. And I started asking him to add things. His name was Truvis, kind of like Travis, but with a U. And I said, I just kept saying over and over, hey, I want to see everything at a glance. And that is really where the name came from, is I just kept repeating over and over, no, I just want to see all this like on one page at a glance.
I actually didn't know where the name came from. I never bothered to ask. I just thought it was a good name.
Yeah, well, it literally came from me repeating that phrase over and over again. I just want to see it at a glance. And one day I went, oh, that's what we'll call it, glance. And that's really where it came from. So, we all agreed on the name, and then got a little logo made, which nothing fancy, but it's just stuck, and it's been there ever since. Today's grown past, one page and just rebooting phones. So I'll jump into it here real quick, just so that anyone watching isn't just staring at a white screen. So anyway, first thing I'll say, I'm going to log in. It's going to let me jump right in. However, I do have multi-factor authentication. I just trusted this PC, so that'll be one of the things that we'll go through as I kind of start my top-down approach here of kind of running through Glance and what all it does. Let me start at the very top and just, right here below the logo. We've got a little profile here, and inside of the profile is where I keep the information about myself or my company, and this would be the same for any reseller. They would have their information in here. And along with right here the two-factor authentication, which is turned on. If it was off and I turned it on, I would get a QR code, and then I could use like right now I use Authy. In the past I've used Google Authenticator, and I've had people use a couple of different products. I think even I've used Microsoft once, but they're all compatible, and so get that enabled and then save it.
Yeah, that
was a feature that we added, I think, last year.
Yeah, it's such a great piece to it. At this point, I think everyone's using like Google Authenticator or something on almost everything, or they should.
Yeah, absolutely, and definitely using a lot more than ever before. So first thing that we've got here is the domains page. The domains page is really just a listing of all the domains. I'm showing 10 per page here. You can change that. You can also search very quickly to get into just a couple of letters, and it will break this down and quickly bring you to a domain you might be looking for. So we can jump into one of the domains here, and a couple of settings in here. Basically, we've got the customer's name, and all of these items have relevance in different parts of Glance. The name and the email are used for sending out certain types of reports that the customer may get. The phone number is in here, and it's here to be used in the offline endpoint report, which I'll come to in a little while. But the idea is if you're going to get a report emailed and the report shows that perhaps all of the phones are offline, well, you can't call them on a phone that's offline. So we give you an option here to maybe put in the owner's cell phone number or something like that, and it will actually be listed on the report. So you can easily, like if you get on your cell phone like I do, you can just click to dial and jump right in and give them a call.
Right, nice.
A little bit of space here for notes on the domain you may have that you want to share with your team. And as best as I can, I'm going to try and tell you what are feature requests of clients. But I know that the HIPAA button is, and this is real simple. There's a point or a part of Glance that shows MOS scores on the previous, I think, 25 phone calls. One of our customers called and said, "Hey, you really aren't allowed to show that if it's doctor's office or something, and how can you hide that?" And so that's where we came up with the HIPAA button. So if you do this, then later, and I'll come to it in a bit, there's a MOS score section over here on the left. It'll just hide those things. So if you've got employees or something that aren't supposed to see it, you know that you're covered.
Right. And the question, guy,
is that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Then Derek can ask his question. So the contact email for the customer, and the customer you're referring to the customer of Glance, right? Or can this also send to the end customer? As it kind of
there is some end user stuff in different parts, but this is for the end customer. This is not a Glance user. This is the end customer.
Okay, great. That's what I was looking for. Derek, what were you gonna ask?
So my question on the HIPAA piece is that can it automatically detect it if the system's already set to HIPAA compliant domain?
Well, at the time that we built this, there wasn't a flag in the API. Okay. But since you're asking the question, it may be possible that flag has been set now. It just wasn't something that we could query, and we didn't want to wait on it, so we just said, all right, we're going to build it in. But the original intent was that if it was marked HIPAA elsewhere, or if there's a HIPAA flag set, then it would read from that on the NetSapiens server. But today it doesn't. It'd be pretty easy for us to change that, though, if the NetSapiens API or the SkySwitch API has changed in some way to allow that.
Yeah, it does allow you to check it,
Sure.
And I imagine him mentioning that you'll probably have it in the near future.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you brought that up because we haven't followed up on this in a while, but it will be a lot easier just to follow the lead of the portal. Hidden simply hides a domain from most of Glance. I mean, it's still going to be listed in your domains, but you may not want to see any references to any endpoints or anything in your offline report or some other reports. So that's what Hidden does. We all like big customers, but sometimes you have a guy with one or two telephones and you just aren't really interested in being alerted if they're offline or not, then you can mark a domain as hidden. The next one is Send E911 Client Report. Now this is really, really cool and I think is awesome. So the idea here is to have a report that the system will automatically send to your end user. And it will list out in a grid form all of the extensions along with the extension name, first and last name, and then the physical address associated with that user. So obviously inside of the portal, you're going to put the 911 number and you'll have had the 911 registered and verified. But you might have somebody that took a phone home. And, we share some liability. We don't want to, but lawsuits as they are, if someone is at home, and let's just say dad is sitting there eating an apple and he chokes on the apple and he's in his office and someone just grabs the nearest phone, which is your phone, and dials 911, well, you want the ambulance to show up there and not the office.
Right.
The idea is that, like I know in my business, I tell the customer, I make them sign a form that says if you move a phone, you're going to let me know prior to moving it.
Yeah, and that's a great way to do it. For sure as well.
Yeah, but you know what? It doesn't stop. I mean, there's kind of two things it won't stop. One, it won't stop them from moving it anyway, right? I have a large bank I take care of, and they moved like 25 phones without telling me. And it didn't bother me. I mean, they can go to work, but really they should have let me know so that we can take care of it at 911 and assign each of those phones a proper address.
Yeah, and I'm sure from their perspective, they just forget about
and even
that.
if you send a phone, I mean, even if they're allowed to and they do all that, if something happens, an attorney isn't, he's going to throw mud and see what sticks, right? So you don't want to have to defend yourself. If you can come up with, hey, I let you know plenty of times and you didn't respond, it puts you in a better position.
Right.
So that's what the client report does. And we can do a demo of that report here in a little while. But the concept here is this portion of the report is automated. So in a different part of Glance, you can send them just one at a time if you need to. But here I can choose a frequency. So we can do it monthly and just choose the day of the month. And we can also do the first of every quarter. So if it's a company that has a lot of transition, you may do that. And if it's a company that rarely ever changes anything, you do it once a year. And it'll do it January 1st of every year.
That's excellent. So what kind of information is the report showing? I guess we could wait for the report because we're going to
it'll just be a grid with addresses and the extension, but we'll do a demo of the report, and I'll get it in via email.
Perfect.
Recently added is the Send Daily Offline Endpoint Report. Now, this is great because as SkySwitch resellers, or as Glance users and SkySwitch resellers, we get our own report every day that tells us what phones are offline. Mine comes in, I think, at 7 a.m. I look at it every morning. You start to see there's kind of a pattern in your business where some people will always have phones offline, but once you start to know that, it's really helpful to see what phones are offline. I have to tell you, it's literally... I had an air conditioning company once that got a report, I got a report, and I told them several days in a week that their internet was probably out because all their phones were showing offline. And I went in to get some AC work done, and they waived the bill because I'd helped them a few times and let them know.
Oh, lucky you! That's amazing.
Yeah, and it was a decent bill. I mean, I want to say it was around $200, and he said, "You don't owe me anything." He says, "Who else would let me know that my internet was down before I ever got here?" And I'm talking like, I was letting him know early.
Yeah.
So it's a great, and if you're an MSP, it's really valuable.
Yeah, nothing goes farther than being proactive like that.
Yes. Yeah. Now, what's interesting about this? I'm sorry, Corey, go ahead.
Oh, that was Derek.
That's Derek. I just see it from a perspective of the different types of products, from Yeelinks to Polycoms to whatever, where there may be a tool for that particular product, but from a perspective of all different products encompassed based on the registration type, I think this would be super, super helpful, other than relying on something that a manufacturer provides.
Correct, because we're talking to the NetSapiens API, we don't care what kind of phone it is. If it's not registered, we're going to let you know.
Yeah.
Right, and that's awesome.
And one thing I want to point out, this is here under the customer's profile because this is a new option that we just added. And the idea here is that my report comes in with all of my domains, but that's not good for an individual customer. So what you can do here is you can pick a schedule, like we'll say, like I do, I think 7 a.m. And then you might say a second schedule if you want to do 1 p.m. or something, so you get one about 6 hours later. And then you put in the client's email address, and they'll get a report that is dedicated to them, branded with the reseller's logo, twice a day or once a day if they choose to just do one, of phones that are offline. So if you've got a bigger enterprise and you're working with an IT company, no one else is going to do that. Meaning, if they've got one of the big companies like RingCentral or Vonage or something, they're not getting alerts of offline phones, and they need to know those things. So this is a great feature for them.
Yeah, totally, and that eases the support burden on you, the owner of the client.
Absolutely. And then finally, featured domain. This was just added recently. This is just a way, think of it like favorites in your bookmark. When I go to my different modules like endpoint control or offline endpoints, I tend to put my new customers there. So I might not have, this is an older customer I use for demoing a lot, but I would normally have this one checked. But if it's someone I'm in a lot, just a little bit quicker, I don't have to search for a domain. It's just always going to be displayed prominently on each individual module. Yeah, okay, right. So I'm going to move on from here, and we're going to jump into endpoint control, which is the next module. And here we can see some featured domains here that are listed out, and I can quickly jump into one, but I can also come up here to the search field, and I can search for any domain very quickly. So I've got over 150 domains in here. I can just start typing a few characters, and it's going to pull one up. At that point, I just click on a domain, and I can get into it, and I can see my extensions minus anything that I've hidden. What I mean by hidden is that you have extensions that maybe don't have phones attached, such as a conference line, parking lots, ring groups, things like that. There's no need to show those in here unless you want to see them. We can, but by default, a lot of that stuff is hidden. We've got a great filtering option up here. So if I click on the filter, I tell it I'm hiding what are called no device extensions, and those are just endpoints that say no device in them, quite literally, on the back end. Secondary, which might be mobile, or if you have multiple extensions, so you can hide those. In this case, this is unchecked, and if we look down lower, I can see a 101B that is, in this case, I think it's someone's phone at home, the office manager's phone at home. NetSapiens we hide, and that's because there's some endpoints that will say that, and I think that's the conference bridge.
Okay.
And something new that we added, it takes a little bit more overhead, so we've put this into filters, and that's show recording status. On the SkySwitch platform, that's a billable item, so you could have someone turn on recording. We've hidden it because it does take a little bit longer to query the server for it, and you can probably see these little circles that are running here, and it's going to look and say, okay, is recording enabled on any of these? I know in this domain it is not, so once it comes back, those will just kind of fade away. In the case of a domain where it is, it will give us a little recording indicator here along under our features column to show us what's there.
That's interesting, and I imagine it's doing that because you're having to query both the users plus the devices under the users.
Yeah, and from an API perspective, there was not a real quick way to get this information. We literally have to roll through users one after the other. So originally, it was on automatically, and we decided to make sure Glance keeps running fast, and we still got the feature, but now it's just kind of hidden.
Okay, good.
In addition to that, we can actually manually hide things. So I can check, this particular phone, check the box, and then hit hide selection and apply, and it will hide that one until I unhide it. All right?
Yeah.
So we got a couple of stats here. Active calls. I'm sorry, Corey, go ahead.
Well, I was kind of getting excited and skipping ahead because of the feature that you added, because I brought it up to you, which is that geo node.
Yes.
And you're kind of solving one of our problems there, which is it's hard for someone to know which node they're on unless they're staring at it every day, and that really makes it easy.
Yeah, and this is really helpful. So originally, first we started showing the node, and it was really, and that goes back, I don't know, I guess we added this feature maybe a year ago in its first revision, which was simply, are you in Atlanta, or are you in the Dallas data center, or Las Vegas, or one of the other ones. So it's good to know. I actually had someone tell me where they were, and then they discovered through the use of Glance that they weren't registered where they thought at all. We checked. He said it was a bug, and then we checked several domains, and it's like, no, I don't think it's a bug at all. I think you just don't know where you're registered to.
Yeah, and you can also find like a DNS caching issue where they're caching the second record in a DNS SRV record, and all your phones are kind of stuck in their backup location, and that ultimately means that they're not going to hit their primary location if that location were to fail to connect.
Yes, and that is exactly why this was born out of necessity. I remember the very client. I went there and they said something's wrong with the phones. We had a power outage, or they had something happen. I forget what it was. But what was interesting was several of the phones just were registered to the old node. They had failed over for some reason, then they registered, and they didn't fail back over. So everything was registered, but just to two different nodes.
Right.
And in that case, it broke parking. So they're like, we can park a call and pick it up on this phone, but not that one. That is where, and I think you and I spoke, Corey, and you explained what was happening. I'm like, well, shoot,
yeah,
we can probably add that to Glance, and we did, and that's how it actually came about.
Yeah, and that's also since been fixed. But I remember what a huge headache that was, and it can be pretty bad if your phones. I'll just mention it too. If your phones have failed over and they're not failing back, it typically means that there's some sort of DNS issue, or they just can't reach their primary server. So it's a good indication that you might need to wipe out your DNS cache on your router, whether you know you have it or not, or maybe your ISP is doing caching and you can just change to a public service. But that comes up somewhat often.
Right. Yeah. It's been very helpful to have it in here. So here we can see, again, some more stats. This is obviously a much bigger domain. They've had this company is doing a little bit of downsizing, I think, and I've got some personal contacts there and personal friends, so I know a little bit more. But they're showing 25 offline endpoints. I see them on their morning report, so I may, within the next couple of days, call and go, hey, you've got a lot of phones offline. What's going on? I know they closed one office, and we're trying to kind of assimilate those people into different locations. But it's helpful to see it.
Yeah,
I've got some manually hidden endpoints, things that I hid. So I'll take a moment here. We can see that we have 3 manually hidden endpoints here. I'm going to check this box, and we'll go up into my filter, and I just have to hit apply because it's already hidden. The choice is already hidden. And when this refreshes, now we'll show that we have 4 manually hidden, and you can see that one was not there. It's no longer there. once you hide it, you don't just hide it from your view here, but also from the report that comes out daily. So it might be a phone that's, I've got like one place has a lot of that are called spare that they use in different places. Well, several spares can be hidden. I don't need to be alerted that they're offline.
Right. Nice.
Okay, a couple more things here. Since I'm at the top here, I'm not going to use this just yet, but jump to module. This just got added. Before, if I wanted to, let's say I'm looking at this, troubleshooting something, and I need to jump into the next module called offline endpoints, I would have to click on that, then search the domain. Well, we added this function to simply, you pick where you want to go to, and it will take you to that module and within this one client. So it's a much quicker way to navigate through Glance.
Nice. So just jumping on the same client in different pages, you can run through
Yep.
everything.
That's exactly right. And even me as a user, it was, driving me nuts that I had to do so many clicks. And I used to sell a software in the restaurant industry long ago, and the guy taught me every single button press you save is a time saver over time, over the course of a year. And we sold to high volume restaurants, and so my motto today is still remove as many button presses as you can, and that's how I think. So that's where that came from.
I think like that too.
Quick question on.
Oh, go ahead, Derek.
Quick question on the headers here. Are these configurable headers? Can we add and take away some of the options that we're seeing here? For example,
not at this point.
Okay. The reason I ask is something like the ability to use sites in the future and internal IP addresses from the device itself can also be an indicator of whether a phone's been moved and where it belongs.
Absolutely.
If you see all the same sites, all the same IP addresses, and then you start seeing random internal IP addresses, you know something's been moved.
That is exactly right. Yep. So I'll jump into that right now and show you some neat stuff. So I'm gonna click on this line here for this customer, and it's gonna expand. And now I can see a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so a couple things I can see here. The status of this phone is registered. I've got a voicemail pin here. I have the ability to view the pin if I toggle this, and it will tell me what the password is on the voicemail pin is on this. You cannot see that today in NetSapiens. You can change it, but you can't see it. We have a lot of clients I'll call and go, I don't remember what my pin is.
Right.
In fact, yesterday I had someone ask me, I said, I bet I know what it is. And I told them, and then I clicked on this, and it was different. They had, in fact, updated it from what the default was. So the cool thing here is I can also change it from here. I just have to simply put in a new pin and hit Save Changes.
Nice.
I've got my LAN address, WAN address, I should say, and the port. The actual port was a suggestion from Corey, probably last year sometime.
Yeah.
And I've also got a pop-up here for geolocation, which is another API that you can go and get on your own. It's a no-cost API. We have a link inside of Glance, and if you sign up for it and just put your API details inside of Glance, then you'll get pop-ups here also.
Yeah, I haven't seen
and as you know, geolocation data, it's not perfect, but it is certainly helpful.
Yeah, it gets you close.
On the also, we have a clickable link here for the LAN address. Again, great for MSPs. We have control of, I think, in my company, many hundreds of PCs. So we may jump in, and if it's a customer that we're the MSP and we're also the telco provider, then this is really handy to jump in, and if we have to get into an endpoint and look at it. I've got make and model of phone along with the firmware. Got their dialing policy, so it can also be changed. If I need to, for example, we go to, say, U.S., Canada, and Puerto Rico. We're in the Florida area, so a lot of people do use Puerto Rico. Just added, again, by someone's suggestion, is a link that will hyperlink today to Yealink's management portal if you have I think it's a YMCS account.
Yep.
This will open up in a new tab, and with the MAC address there attached, and it'll take you right into the phone in their portal. And then we've got features here. So what features are enabled? So voicemail is enabled, and transcription is not enabled, but if I click on this, it will, in fact, enable it.
Okay, nice. And so going back to the YMCS, is that functionality there for any of the other manufacturers or just Yealink?
Not yet. Nope.
Okay.
And YMCS just got added. In fact, we're even making just a real minor modification here this week. So this is a brand new feature.
Okay. Nice. Good start.
Another. Is there a way to see whether or not button mapping or button builder has been enabled on a device?
There is not. Not today. So if that is something, generally the question or the answer is if it is exposed in the API, then we can probably do it.
It has to be exposed. I can say that, but I haven't hunted for that. So we'll have to look and see how we can get that. And yeah, we could talk about
so that's a great question, and actually, I should probably be taking some notes here just to, when we come up with these ideas like button builder, this is where a lot of our ideas come from, is during demos that I do with people. They'll ask a question and go, hey, that's a great idea.
It's really helpful when you move a device from one extension to another and you find that you run into issues. If you can see that button builder is enabled, that's a dead giveaway. You're going to have an issue. So.
Interesting. Okay.
That's true.
So moving on,
also
a couple of
delete
notes here. If you choose to have notes, you can enter them in here. And then a brand new function. This is a reseller out of Alabama that asks for, can we view overrides? And so now I can see if there are overrides on the extension level.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Is that editable?
It is if you check this box.
That's
so we check the box, and now I can edit it.
Yeah, that's fantastic there. That's huge.
Yeah, this is...
Does that show...
Go ahead.
I didn't see. Does that show inherited from the domain, or is that just specific to the device?
Specific to the device.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe you can actually query the domain overrides at this moment. You might be able to, but another thing we'd have to look for.
One thing I want to point out here, just going back to what we were talking about before, is you can take this IP address here. We were talking about, kind of helping find sites. So I can bring this IP up here and do a search on it, and it will come back with only the phones at that site. So we just drop down to just a handful of phones here because they're all at one location. If I remove this, then we see all of the phones. And so almost anything in here is searchable. So now we get back to all of the phones.
Yeah, that's great.
That's very nice.
We're just about to redesign, just upcoming here in the next couple of weeks, will be a redesign of the search function where we just shorten the field a bit. And then we're going to, as you see that we can see some offline phones in here, what we'll do is actually give you a checkbox to say, basically, show me offline only. And you may want to just get to them quickly so that you know what's offline and have a quick look at it without having to scroll through everything or look for them. Okay, a couple of hidden features is under the settings button. So for example, I've had a lot of requests to reboot phones. Glance, one of its very first features was to be able to reboot phones. Now we can really reboot a couple of different ways. So I'm going to select all the phones at this site. And I'm going to say reboot. And it gives me an option. So I can reboot them now. I can schedule a date and time. And I can even do a recurring reboot, like we're going to reboot every Wednesday at midnight, something like that.
Yeah, that's great.
And it will also, if you check the box, it'll send you an alert after this is completed.
That'd be super helpful when changing firmware.
And I noticed too, you had a just update, so I guess you figured out how to do the check sync without reboot.
I don't think we have. We haven't added that as a feature.
Okay. So under the settings
button,
but
that is something that came up recently, so that is something that I'd like to look into.
Yeah, under the settings button, what's that other option there?
See if it's going to let me do it. There we go. So this is a way that we can turn on and off features pretty quickly. So here I can enable the setting, and then I can turn on or off. So this is call recording. One of our North Carolina resellers asked for this. They said, is there any way to update pins? They had to update a whole bunch of voicemail pins, and they were doing them one by one. And I felt bad because the day they asked me, there was no way to do it, but it made it to our list. And so now you can update all of your pins to one thing, which is what they wanted, all at one time.
Yeah.
Okay. There's announce in audio directory and list in directory. Now this, depending, you might have a whole bunch of things you want to remove from your audio directory. So you just select like here I'm selecting all. I don't have to select all. I can simply select a handful of these and have these same features and turn things up and down, on and off. And then finally, dial policy can be changed here very easily for all of the endpoints that are selected.
Nice.
So this is a mass update, if you will.
Yeah.
One thing that would be really helpful from a staging perspective would be the ability to enable devices, the initial device from from a mass import, basically from a staging. I've always done all the call flow, all the users on everything, and then once I was ready to actually build all the devices out, then I would turn them on individually and then import all the Macs. It'd be nice to be able to have that add device functionality from a mass perspective.
I'll make a note on that.
Because if I stage it on the 29th of the month and they don't go live until the next month, I would want to.
So you're talking about maybe
later.
Holding them in a database.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Awesome. I've written that down. Okay. I think that's about it in here. I mean, there's maybe some more detail, but I won't belabor it too much, and we'll move on to the next one. But the concept here is to be able to quickly modify and change and find settings and things like that. The ability to quickly search and reboot on the schedule or whatever. I will say in regards to doing the multiple selection and the mass update, I had to use this myself the other day. We have another non-glance thing that we did with the API for our clients, which is we show a directory of all of their users by first name, and I think we sort it by last name, by first name, and by extension, and it shows up in their phone using the Yealink XML browser. Well, there was a bug in a client site, so I just came in and I basically hid them all from the directory, which is kind of how we see them. And then I went back and I enabled only the ones that were necessary. And it was very easy to do it through here, and it got rid of whatever little bug there was that was stopping our XML from reading correctly and made everything up to date. So it was just great to be able to use a feature that we had just built for someone else, and it was very helpful for us.
Yeah, I think...
Okay, we'll stay... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Corey.
Well, I was just thinking like how far Glance has come, and it's really over the years come from being just a helpful tool to like a critical, necessary tool. Like if you're using it, you probably can't live without it. That's just compliments to you on how you've stuck with it.
I appreciate that, and really we've grown this way just because we have resellers that stay engaged and just keep saying, can you do this or can you do that? I put out an email recently, said, what would you like to see? And we got several responses to that and actually added a bunch of features based on it. I will say also, there are resellers out there that use this as a part of their workflow every day and when they onboard new customers. So we use it also, but what's amazing to me is that I build it and there's resellers out there that use it more so than even we do. And if anything, if there's a bug or anything, man, they call me out on it really quick and help me get it fixed.
Nice.
Okay, so I'm going to use my jump to module, and we're just going to go to the next module using the same customer. So we'll do offline endpoints, and this will bring that customer up, and there we are. So now you can see they have quite a few offline endpoints. The only thing you're not viewing here is anything that I would have hidden manually. But a couple things to note here. We can see a few of these have the same or very close off time. So these are off a little bit, a few hours here. Oftentimes we'll see where they are all right down to the minute with the same offline time. And that's really how you identify that they had internet provider go down, the router's broken, something like that. When they all show offline at the exact same time, then you know what's going on.
Yeah.
I've also used it, and a lot of resellers have to find phones that have been offline for a long time. And that's really happens where, look, we're paying for licensing, but there's no point in paying for something that's not being used.
Right.
And so a lot of times we have found that we had demo phones set up for people, or in our office we've had demo phones. I can't tell you the number of people that have told me that they found 5 or 6 phones that they've been paying for years that didn't even exist anymore. So it's a great way to find things that are old and offline that you can clear out of your database. When you've got 100 seats, when you're a new reseller, those things don't happen much, but as you get bigger, you start missing things, and this is a great way to find them.
Yeah, and I've gone back to resellers who've had devices offline, like big chunks of devices and their domains, and kind of wonder like why we're telling them that when we're making money on those endpoints, and they probably are too because they're probably charging the end user. But having the ability to self-audit and just save money where it's needed to be saved, it's big. That
totally agree.
$3 a month add up.
Totally agree.
When you have 100.
And in a case like this, I am selling it, so this customer, I'm not losing money. I mean, they're offline, but they're paying for it. So there's not a loss for me. However, I'd rather see that they're online. And so this is a good example of a customer that, you would send them a daily offline report. I know these guys don't have an in-house IT person, so I don't have anyone to send it to. Nevertheless, I think it'd be pretty neat to do that for a customer that can use it. So I'm going to jump up here to the scheduler. And so we're in the offline endpoint module. The scheduler here has got in it, when will I get my global offline report? So here it says 7 a.m. That's when my report comes in. I don't do a second one. By the time 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock rolls around, I've got so many other things on my mind. I don't tend to pay attention to it, so I turned it off. And then I've got in here where I can check boxes of who is going to get an offline report every day. And you may have someone or something that needs to get an email, such as a ticketing system. So you can add additional emails that are not users. These people are users, under this domain or under this reseller account. So if I want Jonathan to get the report, I just check this. In this case, if it is someone or my ticketing system, and I want someone to see it via that, I just add an additional email address here, and it will get that report every day. So I'm gonna pop open my email for just a minute on my other screen, and I'm gonna look real quick for my report, and then I can give you an example of one. So bear with me for a minute while I go to 7 a.m. today, and I'll have a report here real quick just to kind of show you.
Great.
Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so this is what one looks like. So this is my offline endpoint report for today, and I can see, get rid of that, and I can basically scroll through this. Here's an example. This company here, all these endpoints are offline. That's because we delivered the phones yesterday, and he's distributing them to their individual locations. It's a new business that's starting up. Here's where I've told you there's a phone number. So this is just a dummy number in here to prove a point. But if I got this on my cell phone, I could click to dial, and then that might call, and I could say, hey, you guys have a whole bunch of phones that are out, and just someone that I can reach out to quickly. Every day, this report looks different. But not a day goes by that I don't look at the report, typically even on the weekends.
Yeah, I imagine. Is it querying at the time of the report, or is there?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Yes. And I'll tell you an interesting story now. Today turned out to be a good day, but I was up very early this morning, and at 4:36 a.m., I was actually watching YouTube, having a cup of coffee. I got YouTube stopped playing, and internet went out. Now I'm on Frontier, and about half of my customers are probably on Frontier in the Tampa area. The other half are on Spectrum. And nice. I thought, well, that's strange. So I turned the Wi-Fi off on my cell phone, and I'm looking like, is the internet down? And so I turned off the Wi-Fi and went to cellular, and then I pulled up one of my other apps, and I was able to verify that every customer of ours, whether they were IT or phones, in the area that I live, all went down at exactly 4:36. Now, luckily, about 5 minutes later, they all came back up.
Yeah.
Had they not, I would have had a glance report at 7 a.m. showing me that all the phones were offline. And, I happened to be awake this morning when it happened, but, we've had things happen before where there's an outage in an area, and we turn right to glance to see, is it, offline like we think it is. And so it's been very helpful that way.
Yeah, that's another way to look at it too. If you're an MSP and you're probably using some tool set already to look at SNMP or just pings, ICMP type traffic, and determine if your clients are offline. And this is a completely different way to do it, where it's real, like UDP or TCP, TLS traffic.
I use it with other tools. Like if I see someone's offline, I'm also going to look at my my remote control app. I'm going to look, for example, this morning I pulled up I run a Ubiquity server in the cloud, and I've got dozens and dozens of clients on it. I was able to see that everybody that went offline at 4:36 was all in my town and all on Frontier. And right then I went, okay, let's just hope in the central office they're rebooting a switch or something. And I think that's what it was, because we all came back up at the same time. I say it's a good day because it started out at 4:36 to look like it might not be such a good day when you're, running a phone business and running an IT business. You don't want to see everybody go offline at once.
Yep.
Okay, so just wrapping this up. This, again, offline endpoint report comes in whenever you like, once or twice a day to whoever you like, and very handy. Okay, we'll go back out of there. And again, we've got the feature domains here. So this is the bottom item is a brand new client. They've been with us for just a few days. I can click on it. It says no offline endpoints are found, which is good news. Again, I can use a jump to module, and I can go to endpoint control, and I can see those actual endpoints for that particular customer. And any notes that I've got on them, I can see that voicemail is enabled on each of those extensions just by mousing over it. And I see something else. Corey, do you see the problem here?
Yeah, I do. 202.
202. Now that's interesting because I was in this today and they did tell me they had a problem and I didn't think to look and glance at the time. So what we're going to do here, just for fun, we're going to go right here and we're just going to say reboot endpoint, reboot instantly, and we'll reboot that phone. That's a newer phone. It's in this case, it's a T53W, I believe. So those reboot pretty quickly. So now, sometimes they reboot too fast for us to catch them going offline, which is interesting because they will show offline. T46s, for example, a T46G, a little bit older phone, it's offline for a good 3 minutes when it does a reboot. The newer phones, sometimes we don't catch them. The status doesn't drop off in NetSapiens quick enough for us to see them.
Right, and
so
there's several ways to that could be addressed at kind of the reseller level. Is if one is you can schedule or you can change your settings on your phones to have the phones deregister on reboot.
Okay.
And then they'll go offline right away. Otherwise, you're waiting on the timers. So you're kind of just waiting for the expiry timer on the registration to expire.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, see, every time I do this with Corey, I learn something. Yeah. No, that's handy to know. So I think that might be something we'll want to add to our overrides just to make sure that that it will make it easier for us, with glance also. I'm going to refresh this a few more times and we're probably going to move on, but I expect to see either that this will change or we're going to have to figure out why it's not changing. I do know this pretty low-end router in there, not one that we provided and not one that I like. That may be something we have to address and just see what's going on there. Okay, we're going to move on. So we've covered endpoint control, offline endpoints. We're going to move on to SIP ALG, which is just a handy tool to find out if there are problems. I'll show you a problem that I saw here a few minutes ago. We're going to go back to this larger customer. They have a lot of endpoints. Oh, maybe I'm wrong about that one. Let's just see. All right, let's pick another one. I know someone else. So you've got some awful. Okay, so here we go. SIP ALG. So these are phones that we would see, and I'm going to show you what I mean here. We're going to go to the same domain in endpoint control, and we'll show this in a little bit different way. But we're trying to find phones that have potentially got SIP ALG enabled, and we're going to scroll through here, and there they are right there. So I have possible SIP ALG. It showed up in the other report also. So if I click on this, what I'm going to see is that the WAN and LAN IP address match. All right.
Right, and for anyone who might not know, that's what ALG is doing. It's just masking the private IP address to it's trying to help the NAT scenario. But in this case, you could also tell it's somewhat of a bad SIP ALG because it's carrying over the same port. So if you have like a SBC in place, it's typically going to use a static port on the WAN address, and it's okay with an SBC to use ALG, but anything else, you pretty much have to have it off.
So, and that's, when I first added this module, and this has been in here for quite some time, I was fanatical about getting a hold of people, and you need to turn off your SIP ALG. And to this day, we still make sure. In fact, the last domain that I was in a few moments ago, it was on until I got in the router and turned it off. But what I've also found is that there's two cases where I don't make a phone call. Number one, if they're not calling me after the fact complaining, then they may not use the phones in a way that SIP ALG really bothers them.
Right.
It seems to, in my experience, it can really mess with call parking and stuff. But in this case, these guys have been online for probably 3 years, if I had to guess, and they've never once complained. So they've got SIP ALG on, they don't complain, I don't get too panicked over it. Another place is where we have people that, with COVID and people going home and working, we see it very often on home routers. Especially the cable company. I don't worry about it too much there either. when there's one phone with SIP LG, it doesn't tend to break things in the same way that it did for me, at least in my experience, when you've got multiple at one site. And again, if they're not complaining, I don't worry about it.
Yeah, and a couple things to mention too. So one thing is SIP LG is not always going to cause a problem until it causes a problem. And you could have a client kind of sitting idle for 2 years, nothing goes wrong, and then all of a sudden it starts to cause problems with like establishing audio on a call, or they can't answer their phones because the 200 OK is getting messed up in the SIP messaging. That's one common scenario. The other type of thing that we see somewhat often is like an ISP does an over-the-air upgrade of their router / modem, and ALG gets enabled out of nowhere where it wasn't enabled before, or it was turned off and it just gets turned back on. And it's so hard to see those types of things.
Absolutely, and that's where this is really great. So if you do have a report, so we saw the offline endpoint report. If you click up here on the scheduler, again, this is global for all of your customers, but you can also turn this on so you get a SIP LG report. So I'd simply turn it on. You might set it for a different time, 6 a.m., check the box. And then you can also add it to another one if you like, but you can get a report on SIP LG also. And so what you just said there, Corey, that reminded me, one of the values of this is that ability to recognize when maybe a router has been replaced, because that happens too. You know, your client gets they complain about speed or something, and so the cable company comes down and says, we're just going to swap out the router.
Yeah,
that can often cause it. And interestingly enough, what will happen is they might call you to complain, and until you push them, you have no idea what's going on. How did things, it's been fine for a year and it suddenly broke. It may well just be that they got a new modem and they forgot to tell you.
Yep. And they don't bother to bring it up when they're reporting it.
And they don't bother to bring it up. That's exactly right. So when I've said earlier, people use Glance as part of their workflow. SIP LG is one of the things that they all tell me that they use just to check. I don't know if they get the report or not. What I do know is that they go into the module and they look to see if it is enabled.
Yeah, that reminds me of one other thing. If we go back to kind of the endpoint control, and
okay,
I'm kind of remembering why I asked you about enabling the ports instead of just the IPs, and that's just the phone should maintain a static NAP port. So typically you'll see internally the phones will have a 5060 or 5061 in like TLS, but then the NAT port on the WAN IP should typically be it should be static. So what I mean by static is unless the phone reboots or the network reboots, that should not change. So if you jump in and you see that port on the WAN address, not the LAN address, changing, then it indicates that you're having some sort of UDP timeout issue or just some connection issues between the phone and the firewall. So another good indicator of potential problems.
Yeah, and I want to point one more thing out. And if you mouse over this, you notice it says possible SIP LG. The reason that we don't say it is SIP LG is because there's another way that you can have the WAN and the LAN be the same, and it's actually more dangerous, and that's phones are on the open internet.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And that has happened to me twice that I know of. We shipped 5 phones to a client up in North Florida, and I got a phone call. I was at another client working, and someone at SkySwitch called and said, "Hey, we've got a phone that we know has been hacked. They're trying to make fraudulent calls on it." What had happened was the cable company had misconfigured the router. They had a multi-port router, and it was supposed to go, modem, router, switch, but the employees who were just trying to set up the office, they just opened an office in a neighborhood and they were plugging everything in. Well, the first 5 things they plugged in were my telephones, and they plugged them directly into the router, and they picked up several ports. Every port was getting a routable IP address on the open internet.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It didn't take very long for the scanners out there to find those phones and to break into them.
Right. Do you remember how fast it was?
I remember it was pretty darn quick, like within a day.
Yeah. So I've actually done this before where I put a phone on the open internet and just look for how fast it starts getting hit, and it was within 5 minutes. And then
wow.
within maybe 10 or 15 minutes. This was several years ago, but you started seeing brute force attacks come in. So
it'd be interesting to know how much traffic is out there in the internet that is malicious that we're just not even aware of. I mean, you wouldn't know that people are out there scanning like that until you put a vulnerable device online.
Yeah, and there's actually public websites and services that will tell you, like, you could say, I know a weakness in this particular Yealink phone with this firmware. I know how to get past it. And then you can go to a public website, and the website will scan for you and tell you whenever it finds one of those devices by identifying the user agent. So it's so dangerous to have it exposed, open, port forwarded, or on the public WAN.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and things change too. I know I had a client, we had port forwarded, we had a small internal PBX, and we port forwarded in to get control of it, and didn't close off the port forwarding, and quite frankly, I forgot to close it off, and it didn't take them long at all to get hacked.
Yeah,
and we actually moved them off of that onto a hosted account just to make sure that we were safe, and I didn't want to have to worry about maintaining a separate PBX, especially with the vulnerabilities.
Right, and just for clarification,
so
we're talking about the HTTP or HTTPS interface.
In that case, yes.
Yeah.
I got one thing for you. So I did run into the same exact situation with a client not that long ago, where it was a remote worker working from home. There was no firewall, there was no switch, nothing. It was literally just a cable modem, the Wi-Fi, and they did plug in their phone directly into the cable modem. So it did have public IP, and it was exposed basically. So if it's not SIP ALG and it is public IP address, there is an override you can at least throw in there so that it responds only to the registration servers. So from there,
yes,
they did stop getting the malicious calls to the phone because it had some weird caller ID on it. And so getting that override put in, which you could do right here in Glance, just go to the device and drop in that override, would solve that, especially if you're in a remote area, you can't get a truck out there, and you can't get a switch or firewall put in place. So.
Yeah, and that's I've also seen some vulnerable routers where maybe they open up the port and the port doesn't get closed. Just it's mapping it on the fly as the phone is registered, and we've seen SIP vicious attacks, things like that. Where I had a client tell me this phone never quit ringing, and I don't know why it was that one phone, but we put that very override in, and now it's a part of what we would call our template.
Yeah.
But we put that in, and it just stops that.
Right.
Just by saying, hey, the only thing you're going to talk to is registration server. Ignore everything else.
Yeah, that's something that we leave up to resellers to put in themselves. But as ghost calls, typically a SIP device without any kind of trust control is going to respond to every SIP request it gets, even if it's not going to be able to place a successful call. It just sees invite, I better ring, and kind of goes with it. Yeah, that's an annoying thing. And another interesting thing is you'll typically see that if you send a phone home, you don't have any kind of trust control. You'll typically see it on the first phone that's registered because it's using port 5060. And
yeah, the first one, right?
Yeah, so people who are using SIP vicious as they think they're using it as an exploit tool are really just kind of annoying people, and they're looking for 5060 on different networks.
Yeah, and that makes sense for the one. I remember the one client that called me, and it makes sense why, because he took one phone home, and it was that one phone that was probably at 5060. There were no additional phones, and he's like, I really want to have a phone at home, but I can't let it keep ringing like this.
Yeah. Well, luckily it's a simple override, but I think a lot of people don't know about it, so maybe this will draw some awareness.
You have to kind of get burned before you call around and go, how do I stop this? And then, another reseller tells you, or someone like Corey does. And so. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next module here, which is the 911 report. So we'll, again, use this first customer here as an example. So here it's showing me a little view here. This is a little bit more confusing to look at, but what we've got here is I have an IP address. This is I'm going to take this bottom one first. I've got an IP address. If you're using the geolocation feature that I talked about earlier with the third-party API, you can mouse over this and it will give you some information on it. I say mouse over. I think you have to click it and then it will pop up with a little pop-up. But what this is doing is this is saying, and I actually see a flaw here. Corey, see if you catch it. The phone at this IP address is registered all these phones are registered to this 911 address. So what this is doing is it's separating these out by IP address, because normally all phones with the same 911 address should also be at the same IP address.
Right.
Typically. And there are exceptions to that, but typically in a small business, that's how it is. The bug that I see here is that I have a different IP address here. Okay. 101B really should have its own 911 address. So this address here should be the user's home address, not the corporate address.
Right, and I was looking at that, and I was wondering if that's what you're talking about. But there are some good indicators there, too, because those are both Frontier IPs on a...
Yeah, they look real similar, and they're in the same town.
Right. So
and there's cases, if they're both Frontier IPs, you know that they're not going to be like a dual WAN router where they're kind of going out different routes, which I do see happen occasionally. So yeah, you would see two different ISPs.
You're too quick
in
for
that
me.
case. What's that?
You're too quick for me. I didn't catch that one before you exposed it.
Yeah. So this is a little bit simpler one because there's only 4 extensions. Now I'm gonna click on send an admin report. I can also click on send a client report. So actually, I'm gonna do client report, and this is gonna fire up an email. This will come to me in a few minutes, and I'll bring it into the screen here. But in the meantime, really, you just want to pay attention to does everything look right. So this is really just something you have to look at, and spend a few minutes trying to figure it out. We'll take another one here. Here's a company. We'll look at them and see how they come back. Yeah, so that one looks good. Okay, we've got one IP address. Now, if they were registered, they say they have a 911 caller ID, but they don't have an address, it would tell you up here that there's not an address for it.
Right, so this is actually querying not the NetSapiens API, which is still the SkySwitch API, but our actual SkySwitch telco API, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
That makes sense.
I kind of wish my layout was a little bit different here because we looked at different ways of laying it out, and I'm not always comfortable with it, but the information is still here, and it's very valuable.
Yeah, this is super. I remember going back 10 years ago and with 1,000 clients and just going kind of through a spreadsheet one by one and then querying the 911 service provider to make sure everything was right, and just during monthly audits it took so much time.
And this whole module here was born out of my frustration that I paid what I personally refer to, I don't want to offend anybody, but I call it the idiot tax, and I'm the idiot. And I paid the tax 5 times. And I tell people all the time, SkySwitch has been so generous with me in so many different ways. I mean, I don't know that we've ever been out with some of the executive teams with dinner that they didn't pick up the tab. I mean, just great people. But one area I've never gotten a break on is when someone dials 911 and I didn't provision it correctly, I pay the fine. And one of the guys said, "Guy, I'm sorry, man, but we have to pay it. You got to pay it." And I agree. So this module is built out of how can I improve that, not just for me, but for all the other resellers, because I have talked to a lot of resellers that have done that. Now, true story, the next thing I'm going to show you within this report, I built and wasn't utilizing it correctly myself, and I got hit with one more. And it was like the 5th one was kind of like, I can't believe I just let this happen after I built the tool to make it work right. But we had a domain that for 1 full year didn't have their 911 provision correctly, and I missed it.
Oh, wow.
And I got the report. I'll show you the report in a few minutes. I got the report. And then I looked at it, and I saw, oh, my gosh, it's been a year. And I thought, we'll do it in the morning. And we did. We did it before noon. Mm-hmm. But at like 7 or 8 a.m., it was an auto repair shop, and someone was crossing the street in front of them, and they got hit by a car. Oh, and he didn't get hurt real bad. He got hurt a bit, but someone ran in the building and said, "Quick, call 911. Someone's been hit by a car." Yeah. And wouldn't you know, before we fixed it, and I got so angry, and I went, "Wait a minute, I fixed 911. I did, but not in time, and I got a fine for it, literally within the day." So anyway, I want to bring up here real quick the so if you remember, I hit the button send client report. So let me pop this out for you guys. And this is the grid I was talking about in the case of, actually full screen that, in the case of this particular customer. So it's real simple: extension, name, address, and the MAC address of the phone.
Nice.
Now there's also some boilerplate text here. And this is, and my company logo. Okay, the end user gets this. So for a reseller using Glance, it's going to be their company logo. And while we do include the boilerplate text, it can also be edited. And I'll show you that next. But the idea here is to set these and let them go out and let the customer let you know if there's problems.
Right.
And we tried to word it with some urgency to let them know it's important to let us know when 911 information changes.
Yeah, and this is so important. And in that scenario, you'll still get through to 911. And for maybe new resellers who aren't familiar, you'll still get through. You'll get to like a national PSAP, and then they'll ask you for your address and everything. And if the call got hung up or disconnected, they would try to call back. But if someone's having some sort of medical emergency where they can't speak and the phone kind of gets dropped and hung, that's when people end up getting litigious, we'll say, because it's kind of negligent to not have the address on there. So it is your responsibility to make sure that you're providing the information so the police can get to the caller if they have to.
That's right.
So that brings up an interesting question, or comment, I guess. So in my common practice, I've always used a secondary DID for 911, the override. So I'd provision it on their main telephone and have the callback on a separate number. Is that reportable in this as well, or can it be?
I think, it's not going to, it's going to show what's set up on the DID itself. I mean, for example, this does pull from that secondary DID, because if you know, or if you remember in NetSapiens, there's two fields here. There's caller ID and then there's 911 caller ID. So you would take that secondary DID that you registered, and that's what will go in that field. In my case, I'm using the same one, but in your case, you would use a second one. It would show up in here.
Yeah, so I use the override for the callback.
The override. No, we are not. We are not utilizing that yet, and that's something that I would want to talk to someone like Corey about and go, hey, let's think through that. How would you do this if you were me, and see if we can maybe add some more ability to that.
Right, and that's changing.
I'd love to be in that conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that'd be pretty handy. So I'm going to write callback on 911 in my notes here, so that I'm maybe adding the right features. One more thing I want to do here is go to the scheduler. So the scheduler icon has been in endpoint control on offline endpoints and SIP LG. There's another one here for 911. So this is a global report that's going to send out to the reseller or whoever's checked here at one day of the week. All right. So mine comes in Monday at 4 p.m. So I'm glad I saw that, because I'll remember. I'm going to look through my email here and find one for you real quick. And then I also have it go to my ticketing system. And the idea there is it goes to ticketing, and then one of the techs is supposed to open it and review it and look for problems. So this, even though we started with a customer, this is a global setting here. And this is, I would say, the number one feature inside of Glance that will help you, because when I pull this up, you'll see it's really handy, because it's going to give us a CSV spreadsheet. Scrolling down a bit is the boilerplate text that I talked about, and we've got some variables here. You can interject these wherever you want, and it'll pull from your profile of each of your customers. So here, dear customer name, in an effort to comply with federal laws. This is all changeable, and I tell people, if you change it and you think you messed it up, you can just click right over here, sample body, click on that, and the whole thing is right there. You can copy and paste it right back in there.
Nice.
So I honestly, anybody that's paying for Glance should have this turned on, and if they don't, they're crazy. It is that powerful. So I'm going to take a minute here, kind of on a different screen, and I'm just going to look for my 911 report real quick, and hopefully I can find that quickly. Unlike every other guy in the IT business, I have about 1,000 emails a day that I go through. So sometimes it can be hard to put my hand on a 911 report real quick, just because it's hard to get through any email real quick. Let's see here. And in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to hit me while I'm digging.
Yeah, I'm thinking ahead to the MOS scores, and I'm interested in the explanation for, I guess, for the HIPAA thing. And I suppose it's probably just for peace of mind that they want that, but you don't have to be capturing the data and storing the data to be able to see MOS scores, packet loss, jitter, all that kind of stuff. All you have to do is count the packets or look at the RTCP and see that. So far earlier in our conversation, but just caught my mind, or caught my eye all of a sudden. So it really shouldn't be a problem for HIPAA to be there, because it's just statistical information. But I can see why someone would want that turned off, just so.
Well, I'll show you in a few minutes kind of what that does, what the on-off does. So I apologize for delaying you on this. I usually have this pretty quickly, and I'm just not finding it right now. And I wish I could, because it's really powerful. But basically, we're sending you a full spreadsheet with all of that information on it. I guess I'm just not typing the right query in here in my browser, because I can't remember the exact subject name. But let me do one more. There it is. I just needed the right word. Okay, yeah, Monday 405. There it is. Okay, so basically, this is our report. It comes out and it just tells you, hey, you've got your report attached. I can open this up. And in here, I have all the details of each phone number, or each domain. So what I like to do in here is I like to turn on the filtering option inside of Excel. And I'm going to look at the 911. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to 911. I think this is where it is. And I'm going to, let's see here. Oh, that's not the one I want to look at. Give me just a second here. Where's my information? Here we go. I think it's under here. There it is. Okay. So what this does is I'm filtering everything here that had an address. I'm hiding. I am looking for anything that says check E911 or 911 disabled. And in this case, I really am focused on check E911. We'll talk about that first. So now I can look here and go, interesting. All of these as of Monday say check E911. So that means I need to look and figure out why isn't 911 showing up on these. And it could be because I know they're in this case, the phone number and the 911 have two different area codes. It looks like I set up a temp number, and it is up to me now to go there and have a look at it and see if I can figure it out. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is a machine shop, this particular customer. You got guys using blow torches and metal saws and things like that. Easy to get somebody hurt in a place like that. I need to be making sure that we have their 911 configured correctly. So even after this phone call, I will go in and I'll have a look at this to make sure. I may have done it since then, but that's the whole reason that we have this. Now, a couple more things here. We also, if you saw, and by the way, you can just go in here and type in 911 and it'll quickly filter down to these guys. I've got 911 disabled. So this is places where on the SkySwitch platform, for some reason, we have disabled 911. So here's an example here. I have a new customer here on these. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and look at those tomorrow and go, okay, we disabled them, but I know that these have been delivered, so they shouldn't be disabled. And I just need to figure out what's going on. Now, we've also got IP addresses. I can see these IP addresses are all my IP address on that particular customer. That means that they're on the bench, they got set up, and they got turned off, and the last reported IP address, WAN address that is mine. So it's very helpful to go through here and filter things. And so on the filtering here, I'll just say, hey, show me only ones that are registered. Let's hide anything offline. And that gets me down to things that I'm really concerned with right now.
Yeah, and this data is probably going to save you money for a fine, but more importantly, it could save a life.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Yeah.
So this, as the owner of the company, it is really my responsibility to go through here. I talked to a reseller a couple of months back, and he was really mad at one of his employees, and he just kept talking bad about him. And I finally said, and this is someone who I'm very close with, I said, hey, man, I go, I hear what you're saying, but it's your fault. I go, you own the company, and it's up to you to check it. And I would not want to get sued over this, especially if there's a life on the line. But I have to admit, I have to be very careful about that. This is something I have to take seriously and really go through and look at.
Right, and people make mistakes all the time. I wish I knew the number of calls that were unprovisioned that get out every week. It's not a ton, but it's a few, and a lot of them you find they were trying to provision 911 like a technician was, and typoed the number. Oh.
Yes, I've heard of that very thing. Where it was actually, I talked to a reseller not long ago, and they miskeyed it.
Right.
By one digit.
Yeah.
I personally copy and paste right out of the 911 provisioning onto a piece of notepad, and I make sure I copy and paste. I don't like to hand type anything that is critical.
Part of my training with every one of my clients was the fact that I made sure everybody dialed 933 to test their 911 services prior to accepting everything. So once the phones were placed, it was part of their responsibility for accepting 911 services by double checking by using 933.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't know if you had a chance to read the boilerplate text, but it actually directs them to dial 933. And it says in big print, do not test 911 by dialing 911. Dial 933 instead. So that's a part of our boilerplate text on those emails that go out.
Yeah, when I first got into VoIP, and that was kind of the standard thing, was you dial 911, and then when the PSAP picks up, you say, this is a test call, and they say, oh, okay. And I think only one time, maybe out of 100, we got a unit sent out to actually check and make sure it was really a test call.
Interesting.
Which is surprising.
Yeah.
But there's a reason they did away with that, because it would be so easy for someone in a malicious situation to pick up and say, no, this is just a test call, my bad.
Yeah, exactly. Meanwhile, here's a knife at someone's throat.
Right. Yeah. But that's it's huge. And the 911 reporting information is just so valuable. It's peace of mind more than anything.
Yeah.
But the mistakes are so easy to make, and it's really up to you. These are your customers. It's up to you, not the customer, to ensure that everything is correct here. And
absolutely,
we can also go back when we do get one of those 911 provision reports, or unprovisioned 911 reports. We go back and investigate each one of when was that DID put in, when was 911 put in, when was the user set up. Any changes to it, we go through the audit log, and we keep a full audit log for that reason. So a lot of technicians unfortunately get in trouble from their company ownership because they're not being careful there. And it's such a critical thing. I think people don't think about someone's life could be at stake. It's not going to be right now, but you don't want that to be you when you're trying to call to get help and you're having a heart attack or something, and it could have saved your life.
Absolutely. Yep. One more thing I'll cover in here, and this is kind of a funny thing here, but I was in the Orlando airport waiting on another reseller that was flying in, and we were going to kind of work on a job together. And I'm playing with this report. It was kind of new at the time, and I noticed that there were a lot of blanks in the WAN area. And so I clicked on blanks only, and I started looking at them and went, wait a minute, why are these here? And what I realized was these were phones that oftentimes were test phones. Now, I've got some in here, and the last time I checked, these were pretty much all legit. But as an example, the very last line here, I know this is a test in our office, but this may well be when you create an account and there's a box that says, add phone, when you're adding the extension. If I don't have a phone that I'm going to connect right away, I don't ever check that box, because if anything happens, it's a billable, becomes a billable item,
right?
That I may have just overlooked. So I'll typically look through this also and go, why do I have phones that don't have WAN IPs? And what you'll find is oftentimes you have a phone that hasn't been connected, and I've seen them as 500 days old. And that's however many months that is times your licensing every single month. And you get enough of them, and it adds up to real money. So that's why I like to look over this and make sure. And then one last thing I'll say, if we scroll off to the side here, see, is it in here? Oh, there it is. Sorry, it's on the left, is that we include MAC addresses. Now, I see a few that don't have Macs. I'm not quite sure why. It looks like there's some secondary extensions possibly, but that was a request from one of the resellers, a SkySwitch reseller in Virginia, and he said, will you include MAC addresses? Because all these reports get kind of filed away. I tend to keep them in my email, but he pulls it out and he saves it in a folder every week. And he can always go back and look at what phone was at a location at some point in time. And so this can be a little bit of a detective thing to help you track things down.
Yep, logs.
Yeah, some basic logging. Okay, so I'm going to close this, and I will make it a point to revisit this myself. I even made a note on it. So that is controlled in here under the scheduler for the 911 reports. All right, we are going to jump back to, we're going to go to MOS scores, but I'm going in here, and I'll use my jump to module to go MOS scores. And this is going to look at the last, I believe we did 25 calls. Now, Corey, I see something here that maybe you can answer, and that's if it's certain calls, these generated no MOS score, according to what we got back. I sometimes see this on desk to desk, but I'm not seeing that right now. The concept here is just simply you're driving down the road, the customer calls you. A lot of us are on the road a lot, and they say, my call quality is terrible. It could be any number of things, but this is someplace that I always look just to go, what is being seen at the switch level? Are the calls bad there? In fact, even this particular customer told me that she was having some call quality. And I want to know, what does the server say about it? Because if it's good here, I need to look somewhere else.
Right.
All right. Now, we mentioned before HIPAA. And so let me jump into someone. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, we'll jump to this customer. MOS scores. We'll go to these
and
guys
so to
here.
answer your question too, while you're looking for this, there are several reasons why you could have zeros there. One is the call never got answered. It's an obvious one.
Okay, that makes sense.
Another one is if you're forwarding off net. So by default, if you get an inbound call to the PBX and then you forward out, then we're not proxying the RTP, the media, so you can't actually capture the data when you're not getting the data. And we know the call happened and there's a duration for the call, but we didn't actually see those RTP packets to be able to calculate what the MOS score was.
Makes sense.
And there's probably some other scenarios we just have to look into individual ones and see what's going on there. So here's a medical facility, and so the HIPAA check mark was set on this one. And basically, we're just taking the names out of it and we're hiding the phone number. That makes a lot more sense now. I jumped the gun on my assumption there. But
yeah, no problem.
Yeah, great.
So we still have enough. I mean, this is enough identifiable information here to maybe do some tracing in a different portal or something, the NetSapiens portal. But to let you know that, okay, these are real calls. We're still showing the MOS score, but we're also, the name column is completely missing. HIPAA's funny that way. I mean, there's things that you think don't matter that matters to, the regulation.
Right.
So
because if someone's calling into like a cancer treatment place or something like that, just them calling in is kind of a health record, private health information.
Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. Okay, moving on. Vulnerability check. Vulnerability check is one of the oldest modules, and a lot of the functionality in it has been moved to other parts of Glance, but it still exists. And this is kind of a pre-filtered report, if you will. So there is a filter option up here, and this allows us to look for certain things, but I'm going to explain it before I change any filters. What we're looking for here is we're looking at voicemails that are enabled, but maybe, so here we can see is the voicemail enabled, yes or no. So these are yes, and they have 5 or fewer characters, therefore we turn this red just to let you know. Here's a couple that are auto-generated by the system, and they're, what do you think they are, Corey? Maybe 8 characters? Looks like about 8.
Yeah.
And you can see these are not red, so You can also view the voicemail pin in here. We won't do that right now, but I can say show passwords, and that's going to just unhide that.
Yeah.
Another thing that it will do, though, is it will allow us to look at a domain and see, it will highlight in red if they have dialing that can go outside the U.S., like international dialing.
Yeah.
So if you put international dialing and you have a very insecure voicemail pin, someone can get in and they could use call forwarding and route calls out. It happened to me once, so we had some toll fraud early on in my younger SkySwitch days. I do know that the team, Blake McKeeby and everyone, have done a great job of fraud prevention. So this module may not have some of the function or usefulness that it used to have, but it's still very helpful to help you kind of find things. And
yeah, totally.
Oh, by the way, I need to point something out here. I keep going to one domain here, but some of these reports, you can say all, and it will literally look through every single one of your domains. It takes longer to load, especially if you've got a few thousand endpoints on here, but it will eventually come back with the data, and you can look at all your domains and really find problems that way.
Yeah, voicemail passwords are an interesting thing, because if you can sit there and kind of brute force it manually. So if you're using like a 1, 2, 3, 4 or something, that's so easy. And we kind of looked at hackers, and you see their first guesses, and a lot of these people would keep calling back in. So they call in, they get it wrong 3 times, and then they just keep on retrying. Either it's a bot or it's someone actually trying to do it manually, and you could see the first like 20 guesses, and I mean they're all so obvious. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 4, 6, 8, 3, 7, or yeah, kind of just like up and down the number keypad. All those are really common things for people to guess, and because you can do forwarding from voicemail, it is a dangerous thing to have a weak password there. So 7, 8 characters that are somewhat random are like critical. We don't let you put in those weak passwords into the portal, but you can still import them and kind of get past our pre-check to make sure you're not using weak passwords. But another good thing to kind of call out, if people are watching this video and aren't aware, that's any kind of password, even a simple voicemail pin, has to be secure, and it's an easy way in for a malicious party, and it could just be someone pranking you.
We don't always do it, but we have in the past. I'll give people a tip on making secure passwords. I use the template to import. When I build out a domain, I don't build them one by one, but you can use a simple little calculation in your spreadsheet that'll basically take 2 columns and put them together. So you could use an extension and something more common. So each one is different, but it's based on the extension. It becomes memorable to people. Another thing you can do is you do something totally random.
Yeah.
But we personally take our spreadsheet and we mail merge that with a help document. So everybody gets a piece of paper with their unique password.
Right.
And even if you don't know it, once you print it out, you can hand it to them. And then, of course, you can see it through glance and you can update it if you have to. But I know the client of mine that had the fraud, they had changed their password to 2580. If you look at the keypad, that's right down the middle,
right.
2580.
That's one of those first guesses.
Yeah, and it got hacked. And I remember it costed a lot of money, and so that was what got the vulnerability check module and glance built, was that one time I had toll fraud.
Yeah, there's a lot of fraud prevention around that. And I imagine that was quite some time ago, but there are no...
It was, yes.
Yeah, we do what we can, and we prevent it in most cases, but there's no guarantees. And if it's something that's just, I guess, neglectful or just you weren't thinking right when you set up the user, or you used a 1, 2, 3, 4 password, or you had the phone on the public internet, if it's something that's your fault, it's going to be clear on who's responsible for it, and we're not going to take responsibility for you. It's another thing that we can investigate and kind of put the pieces back together and figure out what's happening, why it got hacked in the first place, and then who is the negligent party. It's an unnecessary thing, so just be super careful there.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, I'm going to move on. We're almost done here. SIP trunks. So SIP trunks are kind of a basic module. I'm not a good example of this because I have very few SIP trunks, but here I do have one. I can see the trunk is registered. It's a bidirectional trunk. I can see my IP address, active calls. This refreshes pretty quickly. They're closed, obviously, for the day. And I can see my outbound and inbound limit. And finally, my dial permissions. We do have an email alert. So basically what happens is if the trunk goes down for a period of time, we've got 1 minute through 20 minutes in increments, it will send an email to you.
Yeah, and that would only be good for registered trunks.
Yes.
Not static IP trunks.
Yep. And in the case of the ones that I've had, because I was using some small PBXs, and I had set them up as registered trunks. So yeah, it's not a specialty of mine. So if there's I don't want to call it a weak spot in Glance, but quite frankly, this is an area that isn't as well used because SkySwitch is predominantly a hosted voice platform versus a PBX trunk platform.
Right.
Even though there are plenty of people that have those.
Yeah, and some customers are only trunks.
Okay, we're going to move on to users. So a couple things here. Here we can users that are under our domain, including Corey here for our demo, JJ, one of my technicians, and then here we have two that are unique. This one here, gentleman's name is Todd. He's a customer/agent, and then another one named David. So here's the difference here. If I add a user, and so this would typically be a technician, but it doesn't have to be. And here's where Glance is really neat. I'm going to fill out the appropriate information, their name, their email, their phone number, and then I'm going to set them up. If it's a technician, then I can give them access to whatever portions of Glance I want. So I can say select all, and I'm going to get everything. Maybe you have a technician, you don't want to give him access to everything, just maybe a couple of things like, hey, he can get in here, but I don't want him changing things in the domain, so maybe we don't give him domain access. Maybe he only has that endpoint control. So as we build up modules of Glance, we try to be mindful of this packaging system we've got here. And then, of course, I can also force the Authenticator app usage. Now, what's really important here is the one called Agent. So the difference in a technician sees all of your domains. He works for you, the reseller, and he's going to see all your domains. The agent might be someone who brings you business and helps you support that business and has access to multiple domains. So I can pick multiple domains, and when this guy logs in, these are the only ones that he gets access to.
Oh, nice.
Or I could even go in here and say, he's an end user and call him a single end user, give him one domain, and now he might work for that company. So he might be the IT guy at a location. So what you're doing is you're extending Glance from being an app that you and your technicians use to something that you brand and make a part of your business and you give to the end user. Nice. So if their level is agent, they're going to not see the Glance logo. They're instead going to see your corporate logo.
Now,
technicians see Glance, agents/end users see your logo, and that's held in the settings. So what we want to do is make them really sticky to you. This isn't for everybody. Glance is not for everybody. I realize that. It's really great for technicians, but you're going to have those customers that have got a lot of locations, and they kind of help you manage a phone system, or maybe they do a lot of it themselves. Now here's a tool that you can give them that when the Ring Centrals of the world come knocking, they aren't going to want to leave because they can't manage it in the same way.
Right. And a question here, guys.
Yes.
We don't want to get into pricing because pricing changes. I can say it costs less than a truck roll. I think that's the kind of overall.
Yeah, and I'll share some pricing here at the end if you remind me. I don't want to forget, but I don't mind talking. You're right, it costs less than a truck roll. But nevertheless, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, so are you also charging for the agents, or is there a different pricing structure?
No, today and for the foreseeable future, it's a flat price. So I don't care if you have, it doesn't matter how many domains you have. It doesn't matter how many technicians you have, and it doesn't matter how many end users you have.
Oh, beautiful.
Or agents. Yeah, don't really care. I'd love to see people, take better advantage of the tool.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably leave pricing off, and we'll make sure that people have your contact details and can.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I will tell you that if I consider my time to be cheap, it has still saved me truck rolls. And, even if I sell myself cheap, it's not easy to go somewhere. And if you have an hour to drive somewhere, that means you have an hour to drive home. That time is better spent. So yeah, I'll cover pricing if anyone wants to reach out to me, but I can tell you it won't shock anybody. It's very affordable.
Right. It's going to save you money.
Okay, let's jump into settings. And a couple of things here. Number one, this was a client request. They said we're using the 911 module report to send out to our end users, but I'd like to get a copy too, just to know that, that when they go out, I still get one. So this is kind of like think of it like a blind carbon copy. Mm-hmm. So if you turn this on and put an email address in, any of those reports that go out will also come back to you. Activity logs. So are your people using Glance? So you can get a daily activity log, or you can click this and it will download a activity log of the last 30 days. And that'll include, it doesn't cover every single feature in Glance, but things like, are my technicians logging in, who's setting up reboots, when did phones reboot, things like that. Branding, so you can put your logo in here. And again, Glance will be shown to you and your technicians, but end users will see, and reports that go out to end users, like the individual offline endpoint report and the 911 reports, they're going to show your logo. So you're not giving away Glance. And then we've got some API information down here that you really don't need to touch, with the exception of the IP geolocation API. This is a free API. There's a link here if you enable the editing that you click on to open it up, and then you can put your own API key in there, and it will give you some of the geolocation functionality.
Nice.
I've noticed that they're not always dead on, but I have emailed them before and said, hey, I know these are with, the certain cable company or something, and they'll force a requery, and then they tend to update that.
Yeah, and that has to do with the ISP. I can't think of the specific term, but there's a term for provision.
Yeah, I've had people use it and go, hey, this isn't right. Well, it's really nothing we're reporting. It's what that company is reporting. So it's one of those things. You can add it or not add it. If you do, it's going to show it in certain areas in Glance and in the 911 report that gets emailed to you, the spreadsheet we looked at.
Yeah.
So if there's ever a discrepancy, you just simply reach out to them and say, I know these aren't correct. Will you please correct them? And they'll fix it. And I think that pretty much wraps it up, other than a little bit about us stuff, which we won't go over. But those are the details in Glance. One thing I will say, it was designed originally to kind of fit into a cell phone. Quite frankly, it has grown beyond that. And so today, almost everybody uses it on their desktop, even though the initial thought was I want to see everything on my cell phone. It will certainly work on a cell phone, and you can kind of get a little bit better view. It works great on a tablet also, but I think most users really tend to use it on their desktop.
Yeah, that makes sense from my perspective. 100%. I can't stand looking at websites on my phone anymore. I think it's gotten old for me.
Yeah, I personally don't like to either. I use everything on my desktop. I do very little on my cell phone. There's just a few good apps that are well designed, and we're working in that direction ourselves, but still there's a lot to do, and we just keep adding on new features. So that's kind of where we landed.
Yeah, to each their own.
Just bookmark it in your Tesla.
Well, funny you say that, but the very first Glance user drives a Tesla, and that was one of his requests. He says, I need it to work in my Tesla. And I think it was really a matter of them getting a better browser, but I will tell you, when he got his new Tesla, he right away tested to see, does Glance work in it?
That's awesome. That is
so everyone has their priorities.
So how?
But I think that's a pretty cool priority.
Yeah. So how does one contact you? What's the best way for someone to contact you if they want to get set up or get a demo or ask questions?
Yeah. So before I give that out real quick, I want to make one more comment. I have had people contact me from other NetSapiens. Maybe they own their own NetSapien switch, or maybe they have never even heard of NetSapiens and they just think this would be a really cool tool. Today it is designed to work with the NetSapiens platform under SkySwitch. We are working towards adding other companies. We hope in the coming months we'll have another large kind of white labeler that where there's been a lot of requests. But today it isn't really built out for anyone beyond SkySwitch. So if you are looking at this and thinking this would be really cool, talk to someone at SkySwitch if you've not spoken to them. I'm really biased, but I personally think that they're the best white label, VoIP provider out there. I love it because I don't have to be an expert in areas where I'm simply not an expert. My gig day to day is sell and manage. I don't have to worry about, the things that Corey worries about or some of his team have to worry about. I don't have to think about those things. I don't run the data centers or the switches. I just get the opportunity to go out and sell. And so if you're looking at that and you're wondering, if there's a product out there and how you can do that, trust me, if I can do it, you can do it. And the world is wide open. There's so much opportunity in running an ITSP or Internet Telephony Service Provider. There's a lot of opportunity. So, but definitely look at SkySwitch and of course you can always call me and ask. So to answer your question, Corey, easiest way to get a hold of me, I'll give you two ways. One is a phone number, 813-800-8647. And my extension is 101. And then you can also email Guy, G-U-Y, at calltelepath.com. And that's CALLTELEPATH.com.
Yeah,
so just reach out to me that way, and I'll be glad to give you a demo. Obviously, right here, once we build this video out all the way, you'll be able to see everything. But I can also give another demo if you have questions and want more details.
And I tell you that pretty frequently, I think, and compliments to you and Jeff too. That's just one of the coolest telephone company names out there. the whole telepath.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And obviously, Jeff, the people who know Jeff will understand that. It's some very good credit for that. And thanks for the feedback and the just the advertisement for us. It's not required, and I thank you. It's totally unsolicited, as is this video. SkySwitch isn't getting paid anything to post this on YouTube, or simply doing this because this is a really good tool for our partners to have. It's not a SkySwitch tool. It's third party, and it's you can see the difference after someone starts with Glance. From a reseller perspective, kind of their ticket levels drop, or they can understand a lot more because they can see a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to in turn make the point that I'm not technical. All I've done is I've hired a team of people. Some friends of mine who had already done it before kind of pointed me in the right direction. But I had to ultimately find the people, and we got started with Glance and just added features little by little. If I can do this, there's no telling what someone else can do. It may have nothing to do with this. It might be, they might do a call reporting app with the API or something else. But what makes this possible is the API. And being able to query the data and build something that makes it useful. So I have talked to maybe 5% of other resellers are aware of this and are actively trying to develop things. This is just one tool. It's the only tool like it that I'm aware of, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other tools with different and equally functional abilities. Yeah, so that is another great thing about SkySwitch. I was encouraged from day one that, the original comment was no big deal, just use the API, and really has turned into something really cool that I've got thousands of hours in by now with the team of people and all kinds of people using it every single day. And to me, that's really exciting.
Yeah, and our support team's kind of here to help with the API too. There's going to be either a video or a webinar soon about kind of how to get started with the API from like a technician perspective, not going into programming at all. But we have technicians, and they are just a few technicians within our organization. Most of our tier 3 guys and gals are going to be able to help you out with the API or help you understand some queries or responses or why you're getting an error code. So we are there to help. API, as we said earlier, it it's an acronym that sounds intimidating, but it's not. Once you spend an hour in it, then it's gonna feel very comfortable. And if you can write a batch script, then or a shell script, then you can do a lot of good things with the API in an automated fashion. I hope this encourages others to use the API, and a lot of good things could come.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And in fact, I have a friend in the business that has developed an application that is equally useful now to think about it, and it's all API driven. And chatted with him just a little bit today on Slack, and he and I have talked a lot because we go through a lot of the same things. But in fact, if you're a NetSapiens person, look up Loop, L-O-O-P. Corey, you might know his website. I think it's loopdb.com, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it's loupdb.com.
L-O-U-P, sorry, db.com. And Spencer Scott is the developer there, but he has taken the API and he's gone in a totally different direction than I did, but it is fantastic and it's super affordable, the product that he has got out. And just really, really very cool. So something else to look at and the functionality of the API.
Yeah, and I can think of several examples, and maybe that would be a good thing to kind of show people, because oftentimes it might be just them internally that see their application, or they show me because they're proud of it, and someone who they can talk to about it. But there's definitely a lot of good examples of people who have built their own CRM integrations or anything like that. You don't have to rely on external tools or wait for us to hopefully support that one CRM that you're looking to support. You can actually do all of this, and there's a cost to it when it comes to development dollars, but I think you would be surprised on, or maybe not you, but someone listening might be surprised on just how simple it is to query for information, and you can pick up PHP or another language and just start building stuff pretty quickly. It's a very low cost of entry. It just takes a day, 2 days of time commitment before you're building some basic applications.
Right. And I'll point out this. I mean, in my case, I don't have the mind that thinks in the way that development does. I'm intrigued by it and fascinated, but I don't write code, and it didn't stop me because I found the people. So that's something else. You might be listening and think, I don't write code, so PHP, API, it doesn't matter. But you can still direct people to do it. So if you need information on that, certainly call me on that also, and I can put you in touch with people. We just hired a new full-time developer. And if that's something that you want to do, it can be very affordable. Just get in touch with me on that also.
Awesome. Well, I think that will wrap it up, unless, Derek, did you have any questions you wanted to throw in at the last minute?
No, not right now. Not for this call.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you for your time, Guy. I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thank you.
And Derek, thanks for joining us.